Federal New Democrats will choose their new leader this weekend. There are 5 contenders vying to lead the party. The winner will be tasked with rebuilding the NDP after it suffered its worst election result in history. But in the closing days of the leadership race, one candidate has been in the news defending his record from attacks from within the party. Here to talk about the lead up to the leadership vote is candidate and Alberta NDP MP Heather McPherson. Nice to see you. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me back.
So 3 days left to vote in this leadership race. What's your final pitch to members who will decide the party's fate?
Well, I think the final pitch has to be that the rebuilding of our party has to be a priority. You know, we have to be committed to winning more seats, to getting more New Democrats elected. The role of any political party is to win, is to get more folks in the House of Commons so that we can actually deliver for Canadians. You know, we know that when there are more New Democrats in the House of Commons, we get real things for Canadians. You know, I think about our dental care program. I think about pharmacare, Medicare. You know, Tommy Douglas and the NDP are who got that for Canadians. We need to be in the House of Commons to defend it.
There have been some pointed attacks on your main opponent, Avi Lewis, in the closing days of this campaign. There are criticisms about his controversial elite manifesto, his call to phase out fossil fuel extraction, and his past criticism of the last Alberta NDP government. That one seems to have really peeved some folks off. What do you make of what's come out about him over the last few days?
Well, what I know is that our campaign has been very clear from the beginning. You know, we want to work with the provincial NDP. The NDP across this country, whether it's, you know, government in Manitoba and British Columbia, whether it's the official opposition in Ontario and Nova Scotia and the Yukon, in Alberta, in Saskatchewan, you know, we want to work with those parties. I want to rebuild those relationships and work with those parties. I think that's been a priority since I was elected in 2019, and it continues to be a priority of mine.
Lewis says Canada is addicted to fossil fuels. He has said that he is unequivocally opposed to any new fossil fuel development. You come from an oil and gas province. How do you feel hearing sort of language like that from a top contender for your party's leadership?
I think that it's clear that we need to decarbonize our economy. You know, we need to be moving towards a future-facing economy, and there's a lot of opportunity in renewable energy, you know, in building infrastructure that supports a futures economy. But I think every decision that we make also has to put jobs and workers at the center of that decision. So, you know, yeah, we need to move forward in a clean, decarbonized way, and we need to make sure those jobs stay with us and that people aren't losing their jobs. You know, as an Albertan, I can say I'm proud of what Alberta has done to help build Canada. But for my province, I want to make sure that the people in my province continue to have jobs, continue to be able to support their families. That's an important part.
For sure. Alberta's former Environment Minister, Shannon Phillips, is a bit critical, and she's endorsed you. She's a bit critical of what Lewis has said in the past on these issues because she tried to kind of make the oil and gas bargain work, if you will, and trying to balance it with climate change. And he really was not a big fan of her record. We heard her on a podcast recently saying that she's saying things that you believe about Lewis but are not saying publicly, suggesting that you're leaving some of your attacks on your main opponent to surrogates. Is that your strategy here, kind of have Shannon Phillips go after Mr. Lewis while you appeal to party unity?
Listen, you know, Shannon Phillips was a remarkable environment minister in Alberta, and I'm proud to have her endorsement. I also have the endorsement, of course, of Rachel Notley and other previous premiers across the country. What I will say is that what New Democrat governments are able to achieve, what they're able to deliver for Canadians, is important. You know, I think about the huge impacts that Rachel Notley had as the Premier of Alberta. You know, she cut child poverty in half. She brought in the first, you know, large-scale industrial carbon pricing. You know, she stopped coal in Alberta years before expected. So real important changes on dealing with our climate crisis happen when New Democrats are in place. And then when Conservative governments come in, like Danielle Smith, you know, the attacks on our renewable sector is huge. The peeling back of all of those gains that we make under New Democrat governments is really disappointing. It's disappointing because it takes away from what we should be building in our province. Now, for me, as a New Democrat, what I see is that working together, you know, getting more New Democrats elected, getting more New Democrats as government has to be the key, because every single time it is better for Canadians. We deliver more for Canadians when New Democrats are government.
Avi Lewis, of course, has outpaced you in fundraising. He's collected quite a bit of money, more than $1 million so far. It's an impressive figure in any party. Lewis says he has a large campaign team. In fact, he says it's larger than the number of people who work here in Ottawa for the party at HQ. Do you consider him the front runner? Is this the guy you've got to beat this weekend?
You know, we're running our race, and we've got this enormous excitement around our campaign. I have just really enjoyed being a candidate in this race. You know, being able to travel from coast to coast to coast, meeting with New Democrats from every part of this country has just been remarkable. I'm so proud of our team. I'm so proud of how much we've connected with people. It's been an exciting race, and so we'll continue to run our race. You know, we'll continue to do what we've done all along. It's the prioritizing of the organizing, of reaching out to riding associations, talking to New Democrats. You know, some of that work is not always as showy, but it's important, and it's actually the work that rebuilds our party, and that's been my goal from the very beginning.
I've heard you speak in the past about how Lewis has run twice before in federal elections and lost. You know, he's placed third in both attempts in ridings that he's ran in BC. Do you have concerns about his electability? Is that one thing that you've got going for you? You're already an MP. You already sit in the House of Commons. You don't have to worry about a by-election, something that he's saying he might avoid for the time being.
Yeah. Well, listen, the job is to get elected and to work in the House of Commons. That's important. Now, I adore the work that we do, the work that activists within our movement do. It's very important. It's what I did before politics. But this job that I'm applying for is to be in the House of Commons holding the government accountable until we become government. That has to be the goal. And yes, I am quite proud of my record. You know, in Alberta, I was able to beat Conservatives 3 times. We now have in Edmonton Strathcona one of the strongest seats in the NDP in this country. And that's because of some of the work that we do. You know, that's the work of organizing, the work of talking to New Democrats. That's what I want to take, that idea of putting in that work. I want to take that across Canada. I want to take that so that in every riding in this country, we're building, so that every person in this country who believes in climate change, who believes in taking care of their neighbor, who believes in a social safety net that involves public health care, every one of those folks knows that they're a New Democrat and they can feel comfortable voting for our party.
Just quickly, whoever wins will lead a parliamentary caucus of just 6 MPs, including you. After the recent floor crossing, you're down to 6. It's really an uphill battle for you folks. I know you know that. I don't have to tell you that. But it's an uphill battle. The Liberals have such a commanding lead in the polls as it stands right now. So many of your voters have peeled off to join the Liberals in this moment, in this unique moment as the country faces so many challenges. What is job number 1 to try and bring those folks back into the fold and keep the party, get the party back on track and try and stop Mr. Carney and his advance?
Yeah, well, and I honestly believe that not just for New Democrats, but for all Canadians, having a strong New Democratic Party is important. You know, the things that separate us from the United States, the things that make us uniquely Canada, things like our health care, you know, our pensions, workers' rights enshrined in law, those are things that are in place because New Democrats pushed for those things, because New Democrats forced the governments of the day to deliver. So I think, you know, talking to Canadians about how important it is that we have a strong NDP is part of that. But job number 1, I mean, we've got to get ready for whenever Mr. Carney decides he's going to call an election. That's got to be a priority. You know, getting our candidates ready to go, making sure that we are ready whenever Mr. Carney makes that decision.
Does a majority government after the upcoming by-elections, does that change anything for you, the potential of the Liberals holding power for another 3 years?
Well, honestly, I think that's not a decision that gets to be made by me. That's a decision that's made by the government, whether they choose to ask Canadians to go to the polls or not. That'll be up to them.
All right, let's leave it there. Thank you so much. NDP leadership candidate Heather McPherson. Nice to see you. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, nice to see you too. Thank you so much.
Good luck in the final stretch. You can watch special coverage of the NDP Leadership Convention this weekend, hosted by Rosemary Barton. The party will choose its new leader this Sunday. Tune in this Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern on CBC News Network.